Hi everyone! Now we've stayed in Beijing, China for 2 weeks. I was going to do a 1-week impression video, but we were too busy at traveling. So here we are, sharing our experience of staying in Beijing, China for 2 weeks. You may start.
Today we'll give you some more of our observations a couple weeks in, as well as some little things we've picked up which you might find interesting or might find help you if you're traveling to China. So we hope you enjoy. Beijing's a very vibrant city. We often go out for walks in the evening and there's people out having dinner, recreating, playing basketball or skateboarding, or you see lots of people, they set out table tennis, ping pong tables, people playing kaki sack, or what do you call it?
毽子.
毽子. Yeah, even old people, it's pretty cool actually. That you see people, like a lot more than in Australia, people spending time with each other and just hanging out together. There's a lot more of a community vibe, whereas kind of in Australia everyone just goes back to their own homes. Yeah, in the evening you just see everyone's sort of in a little urban village, just hanging out and doing stuff together, which is pretty cool.
You'll be able to find someone to do something with you no matter what you like, across the whole age group.
I can see through this last sort of 20 years of growth how China's been able to scale and grow so quickly, and they've just built up a template of how to do things just really well. And it's really obvious. I'm sure we'll find out more as we travel around China, but even in Beijing, you can just see how when they do something well, they just repeat it everywhere. And I think it's what's enabled China to be so successful.
Well, I think also because there's so many people that's working day and night.
I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but basically it's just how many people there are here, especially in Beijing. Beijing is almost the size of the whole of Australia living in one city. So wherever you go, there are just so many people. It's Sunday today and we went on the subway earlier just to go across the other side of the city. It was in mid-afternoon. It was like peak hour. We could barely fit on the train. It's just crazy wherever you go. Earlier this week we went to the Great Wall. People everywhere, just people. So I guess coming from a small place like Australia, it just takes a bit of getting used to.
Well, you'd expect already, right? 1.4 billion people.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add about people or the subway lines is that it depends on which line you take. On weekends, if you take those subway lines that have tourist spots, then it's going to be super busy, of course, because they'll have tourists and everyone coming from everywhere, all over the country.
But so if you're a tourist, have a quiet weekend, go out during the week.
But then during work and off-work peak hours, the lines that take people from work, office to home would be super busy.
One thing I've observed is the traffic in Beijing is just absolutely crazy. Apparently it's one of the most congested cities in China, so if you lived here I don't think you'd want to own a car or drive at all. Most people seem to get around by the subway, walking or riding a bike. Cool with the bikes, most people don't seem to actually own their own bike. There are heaps of bikes. I think like Alibaba has their own bike system, and all these different companies run these kind of bike networks and they just dump bikes all around the streets.
It's called bike sharing.
There you go. Like our street outside our apartment has hundreds of bikes there. You'll see them in the evening and then you come past in the morning when everyone's going to work and they're all gone, because everyone's hiring those bikes to go to work and use them. It's just amazing. Something I've found that's interesting is that e-bikes and e-scooters are very highly regulated here in Beijing. I think you need to register them and get a license plate. So there's actually far less e-scooters, and it's actually pretty cool to see people are actually pedaling under their own power here. Unless you're a delivery driver, most normal people are actually riding around on a bike, which might be why you see very few obese people here in Beijing.
Everyone can rent a bike and then park
actually
wherever you want.
Yeah, you can just leave it wherever you want. We haven't tried it yet, but apparently it's really cheap.
It's super cheap.
$1 an hour or less. Yeah.
Well, I can't remember how much it cost because I haven't ridden them for years. But yes, we'll try it.
We'll let you know when we try it.
So yeah, unlike I think in some Western countries, cycling are used as an exercise.
Oh yeah, that's
as like a
no, it's definitely a mode of transport here. Like there's no helmets.
Crazy cyclists on the group, like riding groups. Here is more bike are more for commute.
I saw a few on the weekend, but yeah, very few like
Serious.
Cycler men in tights, cyclists. Yeah, mainly it's just normal people riding. So yeah, no one wears a helmet. I guess you could say that's good and bad. I guess in one way it encourages people to cycle a lot more. The speeds on the road are a lot lower, so while the roads might seem pretty chaotic to someone coming from a Western country, people aren't trying to drive down the road at 100 kilometres an hour. Like most of the roads are 40, 50 kilometres an hour, and even the highway was only 60 kilometres an hour. So I think people it might be one of the reasons too that sort of rail and all that's so popular is that the roads are a lot slower, but I guess it allows everyone to share the road a lot more. It doesn't feel quite as scary as some of the roads in, like in Australia, for example, which are really car-centric. Which reminds me, the bike infrastructure here is really good. Like some of the roads are incredibly wide and they've got whole sections set aside for bikes, which would be the equivalent of like a lane, if not more, sort of separate to the cars. They've got like a whole garden or trees splitting them off from the cars. But whereas in Australia, a lot of the cycle infrastructure is kind of like a super highway of bikes, like it's totally cut off from cars. Here, bikes are part of the road network, so they're still stopping at all the stoplights, they're still stopping at crossings. Although they're separated, they're kind of part of the road network. So I guess it's sort of part of that. Cycling here really is just another mode of transport similar to cars. It's not seen as a purely recreational thing, so I found that pretty interesting. One bad thing, I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this, but one thing I have noticed here in Beijing, and I know the government's tried to clamp down on this a bit, but there's a bit of a sort of spitting thing, especially older men, they often like to spit on the street, so sometimes you do have to mind your foot going for a walk. But yeah, I know it's not something that's kind of highly regarded by the authorities, but I think, yeah, there's sort of a group of people who tend to do it.
I think, like you mentioned before, there's a lot of people smoking in China, and I found that people who smoke more tend to spit more.
Which would explain why it's a lot more men, because most of the smokers are men, so makes sense.
Like we mentioned in the previous video, WeChat Pay and Alipay, or 微信支付 and 支付宝, are the two mainstream payment platform here. So you don't basically need any cash or anything, no card here.
I haven't actually handled a Chinese banknote yet.
Yeah, so everything is paying through those two platforms. Either they scan your QR code or you scan their QR code. Unfortunately, they only allow access to people who have Chinese bank account. So you can only link it to a Chinese bank account, which is why foreigners get limited access to it. But the good news is now both WeChat Pay and Alipay are open to overseas bank account. However, WeChat Pay does require you to have a local phone number to register it. So, which is why you haven't been able to use it yet.
I'm all set up with Alipay. Works really well. I can pay in the restaurants wherever I go, but yeah, WeChat Pay I haven't been able to use yet, but at least I can feel a little bit like a local, even if I can't understand half the things they say.
There you go. So yes, get yourself set up with either of the payment systems would help you a lot, make things a lot easier for you.
But with it, we've literally been able to live cashless here for 2 weeks.
Yeah, you don't need anything like we mentioned. Like we mentioned in the previous video, there's nothing, no cash. Even on street food, they'll have a QR code showing for you to pay it.
Yeah. Something else interesting, I guess it follows on from the whole payment thing, is QR codes. So when you go to a restaurant here, whether it's a full service restaurant or more of a sort of takeaway style restaurant, they all use QR codes for ordering. So even if you have a waitress or waiter take you to your table that's serving you everything, you'll still get the menu up on your phone. You might, at some takeaway style restaurants, you'll pay and order on the spot. Other restaurants you'll order, and then it's only when you go to leave, you'll wrap up the payment by scanning and going before you go. I guess it feels, because of that integration with Alipay and WeChat Pay, it just feels a lot more seamless. I know plenty of times I've been to an Australian restaurant and, you know, they've got all the QR code scanning and everything, and you go to pay and you've got to like manually pull out your credit card and type the credit card numbers in. That sort of stuff just doesn't happen here. Another really cool thing actually of the payment system is a lot of the time you've actually got to tap to confirm or even type the amount of money in that you've agreed to pay someone. So it's not like the restaurant can sort of just scan your code and sort of just take your money. It's kind of like you've agreed to pay them that amount. So I actually find that quite cool.
Oh, okay. Well, it depends. For proper business who's set up with proper business account and stuff, they can just scan your code and take the amount of money you need to pay. Or there are smaller businesses that might just have a personal account which require you to scan their code and then type in the amount of money you need to pay yourself to sort of like, it acts like a transfer.
So I guess it still feels like you're sort of paying the person some money. It sort of feels a bit more personal still, and you get a bit of extra check and balance to make sure that you're paying the amount of money that you should be paying.
Speaking of QR codes, so yes, in a restaurant you sit on a table. I don't know if it's because I'm Chinese, the waiter or waitress will just directly ask me to scan the QR code on the table to order it. But I think all the menus we've seen so far are all in Chinese and there's no English. But the good thing is, I think they all have photos. Yeah, so you'll be able to see what you're ordering.
Yeah, all the menus have photos, and plenty of the restaurants actually, like, they do have paper menus if you want one. They probably just hand it over to you if you're foreigner. Just if you ask. I guess with Katrina here, I haven't had to ask for one yet. But I think looking at the pictures, you know, and looking at the number of chilies they have on the dish, is always the chili counter that's important. And you'll be able to make sure you get something that's tasty and doesn't blow your socks off when you're ordering. Expanding on QR codes, they're just everywhere here, whether it's like signing onto public transport, or, you know, you're at the supermarket or a shop and want to know some more information about a product, there's a QR code there.
Renting bikes.
Oh, renting bikes. I mean, I've heard people's pet collars have it. I've heard people go to the doctor and scan it. Like, yeah, there's just QR codes galore here. People are much more used to using QR codes. I mean, even when you meet someone, you sort of get your WeChat set up with them and add them on your WeChat. You scan their code or share your code to them. Yeah, that's just how everything works here. It's interesting. Because it feels a lot more natural versus, I feel like in the West, QR codes are still this kind of weird thing we do on the side. Yeah, it just feels like they've sort of really integrated it more naturally here. And yeah, you don't feel that it's at the lack of service. It's just the waiters and everything are focusing on tending to tables and providing good service, rather than the waiter having to run off and do the payment or something like they would at a restaurant in Australia.
Yeah, so you can just pay on your phone and get up and leave once you're done.
Just something interesting is that while you will have access with an Apple phone to the App Store, with an Android phone you won't. So the way a lot of apps seem to have developed in China is they're kind of built inside Alipay and WeChat. So while some apps you can download separately, a lot of the time you can sort of do what you need to do within WeChat. So you're not actually having to download any separate apps on your phone. It kind of installs within your WeChat. So it does make it a bit easier, because you can just maybe scan a QR code in a restaurant and download their ordering app or whatever, and it's all kind of within WeChat without having to download anything separately.
Yeah, just the platform they created within the WeChat platform.
Very cool. On a few things that I came across here as a first-time visitor might help some people who are traveling to China. The first thing is that I mentioned in a previous video about internet access and the restrictions here. A thing that was really useful for me is that my phone supported having an eSIM. I purchased an eSIM before I came. Their data through Singapore, so it means that even if you can't figure out VPNs or anything, you can get sort of full internet access here in China, at least when you land and getting started. It just sort of made life a lot easier while we were settling in.
Yeah, not just because you've got a Chinese people with Chinese mobile phone number.
No, that is, we'll come to that, but yes. Certainly having a Chinese person with you makes it a lot easier to settle into China as well. Especially to Beijing, getting a subway card, you can't just go and buy one from like a vending machine. You will have to go to a manned train station and go and see one of the operators to buy the subway card, Jiao Tong Ka. You can always buy tickets, that's fine, but I think it would get pretty annoying buying tickets all the time. It's really cheap, like, you know, you could spend an hour on the subway and spend $1. Yeah, you can really get that's an Australian dollar. Yeah, you can really move around pretty cheaply here in Beijing using the subway.
All public transport are cheap in China.
I saw the locals here link their transport card to their phone, so they don't actually use their card once it's linked. Because I don't have a local...
Scan those QR codes.
Yeah, QR code. Because I don't have a local Chinese phone number, I wasn't actually able to do that, so I just carry around my card, look a bit old school, scanning my card to get on the train. Another handy thing, and this is particularly for Apple users, obviously Google Maps doesn't work in China. The whole mapping thing in China is a bit interesting because I think maps have to be licensed from the Chinese government. So the local mapping apps that people use here, I think, is Baidu Maps and is it Gaode?
Baidu and Gaode.
Pronounced correctly in Chinese there.
Well, I tried to use your phone to download Gaode map from App Store, but I think you can't download from any other app stores except for China.
Oh,
so
yeah, so I couldn't even get it.
App store is set to location in China, then you can maybe download it. But Baidu Map, you can download it on anywhere.
I did try to use Baidu Maps. It is very difficult to use. There's like no Chinese apps have any English translation. It's word spaghetti trying to figure out what does what. So something interesting for Apple users is that Apple Maps does work in China. They've licensed the maps properly, so things match up properly, unlike Google Maps if you did try to use it. I found it quite good here to sort of, obviously it's not as fully featured as some of the local Chinese mapping apps, but it's a really good starting point if you're coming to China and just need to find where the subway station is or the park or any museum or anything. It's just nice and simple, and it might be an interface you're pretty familiar with, so yeah, there's a tip.
Oh, speaking of the subway, one more tip is that's why a lot of times I would try to, and I suggest people as well, to stay close to a subway station because that would be the easiest for you to travel anywhere easily.
Another topic I wanted to touch on was WeChat. If you haven't used WeChat before, I would strongly urge you to download it and set it up if you come to China. You can set it up with an international phone number, it works fine. Everyone you meet is going to want to, if you want to communicate with them, is going to want to communicate with you using WeChat. No one's going to text you, no one's going to use any other messaging platform. WeChat is what everyone uses here, so yeah, get it. Another thing that I came across is I read all about VPNs and all that sort of thing before we came to China. All the VPNs that apparently worked and were tested, and every article you find, oh, best 10 VPNs that work in China. None of those VPNs work, none. So the only VPNs that work here are the ones that are kind of China focused, ones that are specifically made to work in China.
Or they're newly developed.
Yeah, so all those VPNs that you read about working, I don't think anyone's tested them here recently because it certainly didn't work for me, so just something to bear in mind. There are VPNs that do work though.
Just research a bit harder.
Yeah, do a bit of research. And yeah, I don't find myself needing to use them all the time, but every now and again you get a bit homesick or you want to access some things that you might have that are back in your system from back home. Like
watching YouTube?
So yeah, that's where it is handy, I think, as a foreigner to be able to have access. So just keep that in mind if you're looking to come to China. This next one might be more once you've spent a little bit more time in China. I guess I have my local resident expert here, but online ordering is certainly a big thing for people living in China.
I'll start with food ordering because we had lots of food delivered to where we live, especially during weekdays. And it's a big thing, it's a huge thing. Like a lot of people, especially in big cities, young people who have very busy
lifestyle.
You can order food from pretty much every restaurant you see here now, and they're super cheap. Delivery fees, they're super quick. Normally it takes like 20 minutes or even less. 20 or 30 minutes or even less.
And you can see like on the footpath, the roads here, there's just delivery drivers everywhere, and a lot of restaurants you can see like are really set up for delivery, like the way they package things, like it doesn't feel like a secondary thing for them, like they've really got it down to an art.
There are 2 apps you can order food from, 美团外卖 and 饿了么.
Funnily enough, 外卖 is like the Chinese word for takeaway.
Yes. Yeah.
All these apps are only in Chinese, so I'm very lucky I've got Katrina to do my food ordering. Certainly, I think you could probably make your way through. There's always pictures and things for food, but they're really common.
And the online shopping, there are Amazon and eBay, but the biggest online shopping platform here is called Taobao. And you probably have heard their overseas version, which is called AliExpress. And they're owned by Alibaba. So you can pretty much get everything, including clothes, cosmetics, food, drinks.
Groceries.
But groceries, yes. Groceries and stationery. Pretty much anything you can think of, you can just buy it online. And if you live in a big city, well actually regardless of where you live, the delivery again is much quicker compared to Australia. I don't know about other countries. You can buy something today and get it delivered tomorrow. Or maybe it takes like 2 or 3 days max.
I think it's probably like, I think you can probably do that in most places now, but we are from the most isolated city in the world, so that could play a part in why it takes so long for things to arrive. But yeah, there's always so many parcels rocking up at our apartment. We can see every day. It's like a full-time job for our shifu to dish them out and get them in the robot to come up to rooms.
It's part of their job, yes.
In our apartment, at the front, there's certainly a lot of lockers that people have for parcel lockers. We also have our shifu, which is kind of like our concierge at the front of the apartment. He's collecting people's parcels all day long. It's pretty cool. Our apartment has a resident robot, and every time we order anything, whether it's food or groceries, our shifu puts the items in the little robot and it comes up to our room and then tells us when it arrives. And it's pretty cool. Just gone down to get a coffee at our apartment, and we've been joined today by our resident friend, Robot. So it gets priority in the elevator, and it's about to take a delivery out to someone's room.
Food delivery.
Food delivery. Why, mate? There you go. Pretty cool. I guess I'm not too concerned because I have Katrina here, but I think if you were spending more than a couple of weeks in China, I'd suggest getting a local Chinese phone number. Certainly, like if you're going to use any of the services for delivery or anything like that, they're pretty good here. They want to give you a call and make sure that you know they've arrived and to make sure you're ready to accept it. A lot of the services require you to have a Chinese phone number to sign up, so just something to bear in mind. My understanding is it's pretty easy to get a phone number here. Yeah, it's not too restrictive or anything, so I don't think you need it for a couple of weeks, but if you're staying any longer, that's our recommendation. The final observation or just thing to bear in mind is a lot of things are linked to your national ID, like a lot of tickets, a lot of the things we've been to here. We went to the Forbidden City and we went to the Great Wall, a lot of those sort of big
tourist spots,
tourist attractions. They tend to use their national ID as like your ticket. They just put it against that. So for us foreigners, they tend to use our passport. So you will need to bring your passport with you to go to those really big attractions when you're here in China. But it hasn't been too much of a problem. Most of the time the machines are actually built to accept your passport. And whenever, I have noticed, not us, but I've noticed whenever there's been anyone who's had some difficulties, the staff are always really understanding and they just sort it out for you. You're not asked to sort of go over to some other office or whatever to sort it out. They always help you out on the spot. So
there'll always be someone standing there.
Yeah, so
right next to you.
Yeah, so I think you're never made to feel like it's going to be a problem getting into anything as a foreigner, which is really good. I guess that wraps up our first 2 weeks. in Beijing. I hope those thoughts were interesting, might help people if they're coming to China themselves or want to know a little bit more about China.
If there's anything, any topics or anything you want to know more about China, you're welcome to leave a comment and we'll touch more on those topics in the future.
So that's our first 2 weeks in Beijing. It's been pretty cool. We're looking forward to sharing some more with you as we continue to stay here.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
谢谢。
谢谢。
再见。
再见。
Hi everyone. Hang on,
Hi,
should we
everyone.
say it together?
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Hi,
everyone.
Do we need to cut this bit again? I had a really good flow there.
Yeah. Okay. You do whatever you want.
Yes. Speaking of, I don't know how I started.
People for the hotspot places. Hotspot.
Hotspot.
Damn, I can't speak English.
You're doing all right.
Okay.
So very cool.
It's very convenient, and I forgot what I want to say. Or do. It's just a lot of money to.
Some places don't accept it. I've read.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cashless.
Okay.
We should cut this out.
Okay. Go on. Getting warm.
Oh yeah? Remote ordering or whatever you want to call it. Personless ordering.
Touchless.
Touchless.
Contactless.
Contactless.
On Taobao, which is owned by Alibaba, and they're Alibaba.
Funnily enough, it's just another big city where people are going about their lives, and yeah, it's just a really cool place. So I might shut up now.